what it means when we're told like it's showbiz, that's showbiz kid, or like the show must go, like deconstructing those ideologies, especially that showbiz kid, and being like, what does that mean? But also more importantly, what is that used to excuse? And when exploring that, just emphasizing, and it's a long conversation, but it also can be if anyone listens for a second and hears, hey, being mistreated by people with power, under the guise that that's how the industry works, is not okay, and it's not safe, and it's not healthy.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the interview series, Writer Real Talk. We have on our as our guest today a writer who I met in 2014, we just figured out, at the BMI program. And I mean, I adore Preston so much. Like, we just spent, 70 minutes chatting before doing this. I promise we're not spent. There's good stuff coming. But there's just a lot of wonderful nuggets you're going to hear today, I can guarantee you. So please welcome to the interview process, Preston Max Allen. Hi!
Oh, Michael, it is a joy to be here. It is absolutely delightful to see you.
I love you so much. I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad that the audience gets to know you, if they don't already, which they should. I think they should know who you are.
I mean, personally, I'm like, great, know who I am.
Please, just know me. But for the audience, just in case they don't happen to know you, would you just give us a little quick hi, how are you, of who you are, what you do, how you identify as an artist, that sort of thing?
Yes, I'm Preston. My pronouns are he, him, and I started out very much in musical theater. I've been working in musical theater professionally for 10 years at this point. And yeah, I do book music lyrics for a lot of shows. I do book collaborations. I do music lyric collaborations for a lot of shows. I work with a lot of very fun and wonderful peeps on shows that range from kind of very heavy and emotional to the goofiest parody you can imagine. And then more recently, I started doing some playwriting, and then more recently than that, some TV and film work. So now I have my paws at the tips of these industries, certainly not in any industry, but now I work across a few mediums and get to choose which is the most fulfilling for the story I want to tell. And had a lot of wonderful collaborations and met a lot of wonderful people along the way. And a lot of, like I said, a lot of what I do is goofy parody, a lot of horror parody, a lot of horror work in general, but then also a lot
are there any pieces that people might know?
Well, my main thing that I worked on for so very long is called We Are the Tigers, which is a horror camp teen drama cheerleader slasher comedy about all of those words, about a cheer team having a bad night, is maybe the shortest way I'll say that. It's some nice pop rock belting going on.
It's good. I saw it off. What theater was it in? It was in
the St. Mark's. It was on St. Mark's. Right, St. Mark's. Theater 80 on St. Mark's. The album is now streaming.
It's good. Go listen.
Thank you. That was my long-term baby, and now I do also, alongside that, because I still do a lot of fun stuff that's just kind of easier for me to get my head around. I do a lot of also discussion and storytelling of trans characters and trans stories, be that trans characters who are dealing with the world as a trans person and the specifics of what that means and the issues that cis people create for us, or just trans people kind of living their life, having a time being in genre, just being themselves in whatever story we are telling. So that's the landscape of my work. That's all of that.
That's quite a breadth. I applaud you for being able to wrap your mind around so many different media and to go for writing in different genres. I mean, I guess I've written plays, but not really. I would love to write for TV and film, but it scares me. I think that it's awesome that you go for that. Because that you said it's relatively new, is TV film?
at this moment, I also would love to write for TV and film. But yeah, a play of mine had some traction in a television space, and I worked in a room for an FX show briefly, and just got to know some really wonderful artists and got to be a part of that process within the last year. That was on the last year. So hopefully some more of that, working on kind of a film outline right now that will hopefully have a future, and very much working. I think the main work I have right now is working with some production companies on ideas they've had for television shows from various degrees, from like one sentence to like a 3-page outline, and kind of working with folks on what my version of that would be and what our collaboration would look like. And then in 3 of those processes, well, overall in more, but currently in 2, potentially in some more, I'm the writer that they've gone with, and we're moving forward, and we're trying to pitch those shows and get those into the world. So I enjoy that. I enjoy someone giving me the challenge of like, here's my idea. How far would you take this? What would your season 1 look like?
I love that.
And he's like, yeah, I want to do that with you too. And I'm like, oh, nice. Great.
Oh, that sounds like really fun work.
It is, you get very passionate and married to your stories, and they don't always make it. And I've had some experiences, especially with queer and trans stories, that you get so deep in and the team really believes in, and it's just hard to find ultimately that home. And then you have to say farewell for now, hopefully never farewell forever, but farewell for now for some of those pitches.
Right. Yeah, I mean, well, as we have seen across the industries, queer and trans stories, it's been a struggle to get them out there, and in ways that we want them to be told.
Yes.
So hopefully this is just the beginning, not not the slog of the middle. Just the beginning.
I always say that I hope that other artists are having a more fruitful experience, and that I'll get to see art from trans and queer storytellers, that aren't my stories, but that I hope are authentic, and that they feel good in the spaces they've been creating in, and we get to see those soon. And I do know some of them are out there. I do know some of them are coming.
That's great. If you have recommendations for us, please, you can toss them my way, and I could share them with the community. So.
I will share some resources with you. I would need to compile some data, get people's names right, kind of make sure I'm doing that in some cases.
Fair enough. I love your mug.
It's Halloween. It's very important.
Spooky season's the best. I love it. And the grumpy face. All right, so we're gonna start with our standard set of questions here as we go through, and then we'll get to our main topic, which will be good stuff. So because this is mostly a musical theater sort of chat space, though we do talk about all sorts of things, I'm curious to know, is there someone who's a musical theater writer whose work you gravitate toward, not necessarily the most, but you find yourself automatically, every time you hear something new has come out from that person, or there's a new production of that person's work, you're like, aha, I want to read more?
That's so complicated, because my answer is so different from when I was young. And a lot of what I enjoy has become very complicated in terms of my excitement for the future. So some things that I love, I'm going to omit, and people can be like, oh, but on Twitter, I know he talks about that musical all the fucking time. Yeah, when I was younger, a lot of, and still, I love Stephen Schwartz's work. I got very depressed, like genuinely very depressed, when I was 11, because I couldn't be watching Wicked. I wanted to just be in New York seeing Wicked all the time. I was like, I should probably work in this business, and maybe also have a different mindset about how I approach being in theatrical spaces. Spring Awakening was a huge one. Tom Kitt's work I really enjoy. Whenever he's working on something, I know it's going to have a fantastic sound. Tons of other artists that I, if I were to name them all, it would take forever. Robert Hickey, I love Robert Hickey, who wrote Lightning Thief and Monster Songs and several other things. A really lovely human, a wonderful collaborator, just a fantastic artist who I was so lucky to intersect with kind of earlier in my career and continue to know. And then last year, I produced a concert of all trans, for the most part, all trans and non-binary musical theater writers, and some cis collaborators who were welcome in the space. And that, you know, revealed to me such an incredible group of people. And, you know, too many, you know, there was 15 songs in that concert. You know, there's still some of that content exists. Certainly the press releases, so you can go get the names of all the artists from there. I always keep an eye out for what Shakina Nafak is up to, an incredible performer and writer and direct across all facets. Kit Yan and Melissa Lee, I always keep up with, who did Interstate and are now casting for Misstep. An incredible team doing incredible work. So yeah, those are the folks who are kind of who have done some work recently that I'm keeping an eye on, who are kind of at the top of my mind, because yeah, I've been seeing some exciting stuff about their development. So I recommend looking out for them.
Heck yeah. What a great answer. That was so thorough. Thank you.
I also genuinely love the musical Cats. There we go. I'll say it.
Thank you for adding that in at the end. I appreciate that.
I needed you to know everything else first.
I mean, I have seen
Let's
some
start out like this.
Oh no.
That's the reaction I get.
I do love when you get on social media and talk about cats. It does warm my heart.
It's this chorus line, but with cats.
It's true. It's true.
I'm not doing anything else. It's fine.
Oh
Let them just be cats auditioning to die.
Ooh, phrased like that. Ouch. But
the
you're
world
not
of cats,
wrong.
they're coming back. The promised resurrection. Well, we don't know if it's a promised resurrection. We don't see what Cats 2, Grisabella Return. Where is that?
Well, someone could write it.
Forget my emotionally impactful, culturally, societally impactful Grisabella 2. Honestly.
Here we are. This is good. I love it. I love it all. Hey, we want all facets of Preston. Okay, so here is a two-sided question. So it's got an A and a B to it. So the blanket part is thus far in your career, which you've already said is a decade. So hey, woohoo! What would you say is your biggest challenge so far and your greatest success so far? And I would like you to qualify those however you want to qualify them.
What a fantastic segue into what we're talking about today, because it's the same answer for both, and it's like standing up for myself, valuing myself as an artist, and navigating the sometimes complicated tightrope. And I'm not always perfect at it, but I'm not always good at it, of like making sure that I am staying as respectful to the people that I'm communicating with as I want to be respected, and then going from there. And in terms of what I need out of that space, and whether or not I'm receiving what I need back to feel like I can do good art and I can create authentically, and that I have the tools I need and the collaborators I need to put together a good piece. So yeah, I think that has been the biggest challenge, because, you know, young artists are taught to take what you get. And I did that for a while, and it was not healthy, and it did not create a healthy mindset for me. And when I started to really be direct about kind of not adhering to that mindset, you know, it's challenging. And I will say I've worked with and met a lot of people who 100% are excited to meet me where I am there. So that's what I will celebrate in that.
Oh, yeah. That's a great answer. And yes, very much hitting on the topic. We will dive more into this in a hot sec here, but
the preview.
That's, I think, a problem that so many of us go through, if not everybody, in various degrees. But boy, would I just like to take a moment and celebrate you for feeling that you can put that in your success category. I don't know that I am currently there yet where I can, and I would just like to take the moment to say that's fantastic. So
thank you. It's tough because, you know, success emotionally can often mean not career-wise. Like removing myself from a space can be it's a different kind of success, and it can be a kind of bittersweet to very bitter or very, you know, just sad kind of experience. But it has been very valuable, and it is very reliant on me acknowledging where I am not following through as a collaborator, on me being aware that when there is when something's happening, I need to explore where I need to take responsibility as well. And I need to be open about the fact that I'm not, gonna be navigating everything effortlessly and, as respectfully as maybe I could have, or, I missed certain things, and bringing that into the conversation with the expectation that other people will as well.
Yeah, the safety that comes along with that acknowledgement from everybody involved, it makes those hard conversations so much easier or better, or at least actually productive. But yeah, that ownership of, okay, yeah, here's where I could have done better is so hard and so important.
Still working on it.
Well, are we ever done working on it?
We are not. No, the forever journey of taking responsibility for our shortcomings.
Indeed. Oh, I feel it in my soul. Okay, so next question. Again, kind of a two-parter, because I want to talk about the macro and the micro. As a writer, so let's start there. If you want to keep it in musical theater, you can. But you write in different genres as well. So I'd love to know, of like your full pieces, which one gives you the most pride at this point in life, and if there's a song as well, specifically a song that you feel that way about, I'd love to know that too.
Yeah, I think that I've had such prideful moments in different shows, because sometimes you're there with your collaborator and you're watching something and you're like, that is what we wanted, and we got there together, and it was like messy sometimes, it wasn't always, but here we are and we're watching it, and that's just like, that's beautiful. I think a big instance of that was working on, in 2019, a musical I write with my writing partner on that, Jessica Kokoska, and our wonderful creative team on that. We developed at the Chautauqua Institution. We had 10 days of development. It's just an incredible group of people, and it's like a very isolated place where we were just really in it together, and it was just really special to watch, the teamwork that had gone into that, and to see we had 3 performances that were like fairly designed, and it was the first time we'd kind of seen it that way, and it was just cool to just all be there together and all appreciating the work that had been put in. And yeah, and then also I take a lot of, it's a complicated relationship with tigers, but I can experience a lot of moments like that where I'm like I did my best with a group of people that I feel really good about having created with, and made some really extraordinary friendships and found some really special connections within that work. A song, I wrote a song called Try that is in a musical that is probably never going to happen, which was a hard, separation, realizing a show is not going to move forward, and you wrote a whole show and you loved it so much, and it's just not going to have a life beyond what was on your computer or the couple readings it had. But there's a song called Try that was performed by Lauren Patton in a concert of mine, and I really like it. I really could kind of revisit that and go, listen to yourself.
Yeah.
Listen to your own advice. But also that song is very much about how hard it is to keep getting up and keep doing these things that are difficult. Be that, in that song, the example is, and this isn't quite the level we're getting into today, but in that song, like the example is, putting your shoes on and leaving the house is kind of the level that they're discussing in that song. So it's sometimes just that's hard to manage. But yeah, I think that's like my go-to for me.
Those are good answers. Those are very good answers. Now I want to hear that song. I have not heard that song, but I feel like that moment when you hear something you've written sung and you just get that vibration of resonance in yourself, and hopefully in the people around you as well, but like having that just like, oh, okay, this is doing something in the world that I think I wrote into the piece and now I'm feeling a certain way. It's just such a wonderful moment to be able to have. Yeah.
It is. I mean, also on the flip side of that, the other song that I'm super proud of is In the Rage, Carrie 2. It's called The Legend of Carrie White. And it is just a character's explanation of everything that happened in Carrie via patter song. And there's some harmonies I find very delightful. And I'm really proud of that one too. Because I wrote, like, that's a song where I listened to it. I'm like, oh, if someone else had written it, I would have loved it. But like, that's badass. So I'm glad I did. That's like the only song I'll say that about. I'm just like very proud of my Carrie recap patter song. I think that I know there are people who like really appreciate Try. I don't know if anyone else appreciates The Legend of Carrie White that I do. But if we don't show up for ourselves, who will?
There it is. Oh my goodness. Wow. I guess so. I haven't heard Carrie 2. I think you posted maybe one song a couple years ago on Instagram that I heard, but I haven't really
We haven't videoed in a while. We've got to do some more video of we have a lovely, cast and group in Chicago. We're doing it tomorrow.
What?
We've already passed. We're doing it in the past. We try to do it. This will be the 5th time we're doing that concert. We just try to do it I try to do it every Halloween in New York or Chicago or wherever, whoever wants to do it. Whoever wants to have a little spooky 70-minute Carrie 2 experience.
That sounds delightful. I would love to see it at some point. I will not be traveling to Chicago tomorrow, however.
All right, tomorrow, hop on that plane. Slack it off.
Oh, good answers. Very good answers here. All right, one more before we dive into our main topic, which is, I know you've already mentioned Wicked. It's fine if we go back to Wicked for a second, but is there a particular show that made, I'll just say that made a big impression on young Preston, but more specifically, if you'd like to, made you think, yes, I want to do musical theater?
So when the Wicked and Spring Awakening and Next to Normal era of my life was still kind of in the performance-y era. So like, what was it where I was like, oh, I want to write? Because the first musical that I ever staged was a television pilot.
What?
So, and we put it on stage at my theater arts high school. So at that point where I was like, oh, I'm gonna write theater, I was still like, I'm gonna write television by way of musical theater. And then just from there realized that I had much more of an ability to stage shows than I did to do film work. So I pivoted completely just by virtue of that. Actually, this is a controversial show. This is actually the very honest answer about me writing musical theater. While I was in college, there was a show called White Noise, a very controversial musical that was playing at the Royal George in Chicago. And I imagine it was an attempt at a pre-Broadway tryout. Whoopi Goldberg was a producer on it. It was a very complicated show that dealt with some themes that audiences interacted with very differently and used some language that people just were not interested in sitting through kind of fundamentally. And I went to that show 8 times because it was early in its life. And I think that might've been the conclusion of it. Just because I every night it was different, like because it was a tryout. And I think even long past previews, numbers were getting replaced, character intentions were changing, like character relationships were changing. And it was just so interesting every time I like showed up and watched it to see this, musical, that the soundscape of it, there was some good music in it. Even though the songs were scary, it was loosely based on Prussian Blue, which was that young girl duo of like Nazi singers. So it was kind of about like, what if the music industry tried to hide what they were really singing about to make them popular. They're played by, oh my God, I want to say Mackenzie Mousey and Aaron Davies. I think that was who it was. I have to. It was a great cast. And then it was also very much about 2 Black artists who were being put into a category that was not authentic to their voice in order to meet the expectations of the industry, as their managers felt that Black men needed to be seen to succeed. So some very complicated themes that were just very hard to balance. And I enjoyed every time showing up and seeing what happened and how it went. And I always am curious about like what happened to that show or what those conversations were like. And that was really formative because I was like, oh, I want to be and I want to change. I like that we can change things every night. I like that we can explore these. Like, I'm so used to seeing shows when they're done and being able to be like, oh, it's a living, breathing thing, this kind of storytelling, was super, super, super formative for me. And I was writing Tigers at the same time. That was my freshman year of college, and I had started Tigers and was workshopping that in my little way at that point. And I don't know if I would have written Tigers if not for kind of seeing White Noise and wanting to be like, oh, I can do that too. I don't have to get it perfect the first time. I can explore and experiment. Yeah. White Noise at the Royal George, for better or worse.
Wow,
Complicated
wow.
piece.
Yeah, and I've never heard of that piece, so this is very interesting for me to hear. But also, how very cool to have had that experience to go and see a show that is still in progress. I'm envious. I wish I had been able to have that experience.
It was not one of my college courses, but my most informative experience.
Yeah, yeah, and you went to school for, what was your major?
What was my major? I started out in musical theater performance.
Okay.
Important to note, you did not have to audition for my school's program at the time. Because I had gotten into USC for screenwriting, and I was thinking about that, but then I got nominated for a performance award for my high school musical, and I was like, the world needs me on stage. So I pivoted hard. But then the school I went to, Columbia College in Chicago, is like known for its very like DIY kind of find your people and do it yourself like ideology. So that was really helpful for me, because now that is what I continue to do. That's how my business works. That's how theater works in a lot of ways. So it set me up successfully for that. But I started out in musical theater performance, and then I dropped that for like kind of make your own major. And there's a very obvious word for that, but I'm not thinking of it. It starts with an I. I'm not thinking of what it is. And I had put together theater and ASL. I did ASL for a year, and I was really interested in that and interpretation for theater. And I saw a lot of shows that were interpreted. And my last year of college, it became clear that I could either graduate early. I'd accidentally cleared a year with summer courses to try to like take a semester or do the Disney program, but I'd cleared a lot, and I was able to either graduate a year early with a theater major that was kind of cobbled together out of a bunch of classes I'd taken over the years, or stay for 5 years and finish the ASL track. So I did choose the 3 years option and left Chicago pretty quickly, and technically majored in theater acting without having ever acted in a theater in college.
Interesting. Wow.
I did a freshman showcase, but that was kind of it. But I did a lot of training in college through my college through a program, and then after with Second City. So a lot of what I did was sketch and performance and improv with Second City through the Comedy Studies program. And then I continued into their conservatory for sketch and improv, and their musical improv conservatory as well, and then left those kind of halfway through to move to New York and work in musicals. My cat is causing chaos in the corner.
Hero.
As she must.
Wow. I love hearing that story, because I feel like, oh, there she is.
Hero's about to go knock over all of my Tigers stuff from the years, which will feel very metaphorical.
We love Hero. She is.
I love her more than life itself.
So fantastic.
Really considering it. She's like, should we do the metaphor? Should we knock all of these off the mantle?
It's like, I hear what he's saying, so enjoy.
Go to your yoga studio, Hero. She has a yoga studio. You can't see. She has a yoga studio.
That's cute. I really love hearing about that educational journey, because, well, for many reasons, but I think something we don't talk about enough, especially in our industry, is just how much of our educations are like unofficial. Like, just by the nature of it, like we have to take our official education, but then we all learn so much by doing other things, like going to see White Noise 8 times. Like, that was so informative, you know? I love it. Anyway, shall we talk about our main topic today?
Let's do it.
Is Hero joining us?
Hero is right here. She is very involved in this conversation.
As she should be. I'm sure she has thoughts.
Yeah, she's like, I can offer my comments and concerns should you need them. I'll be available in the club.
Thank you. So something we were chatting about before the interview, was, which is, it's a huge topic, but the idea of taking care of mental health for ourselves in the room, in the processes, and particularly in educational spaces. And what does that look like? What can that look like? What are we not doing? What should we be doing? There's so much to talk about. I don't know where you want to start. Do you have an idea?
I think for me, like a summation is like breaking down what it means when we, especially as young artists, but at any age, is like new art, at any, even long ingrained in the system, like what it means when we're told like it's showbiz, that's showbiz kid, or like the show must go, like deconstructing those ideologies, especially that showbiz kid, and being like, what does that mean? But also more importantly, what is that used to excuse? And when exploring that, just emphasizing, and it's a long conversation, but it also can be if anyone listens for a second and hears, hey, being mistreated by people with power, under the guise that that's how the industry works, is not okay, and it's not safe, and it's not healthy. And you as a young artist, even if you choose, judgment free to take job, well, sometimes, we talk about, what does your artistry to this particular story, do you want to hitch yourself to this story? And sometimes for financial reasons, it's complicated. But, even if you're navigating that system, even if you're in those positions and you're taking treatment that is complicated, knowing what you actually deserve, and knowing that a lot of times language that's being used at you is not correct, it's not accurate, it's not about who you are, your worth is not defined by this. So that's the soundbite version of that discussion. But it's harder to do. In reality, it's harder to do it. It's a constant effort to keep yourself in check and to make sure you're behaving appropriately. Because if you're behaving wildly and then you're like, I shouldn't be mistreated while mistreating everyone else, that's a different conversation. But yeah.
Right. Yeah. So here, let's start this conversation, because I don't think it's a stretch to say that the majority of people who might be listening to this, who work in the business, or are learning what they need to in order to work in this business, have gone through experiences in their education where that's a lot of the type of environment that was presented to us. That idea of, here's how it is, so work within that. And so for those who might be experiencing that in educational settings or in professional settings, what would be a good starting place for people to start to think through how to protect themselves or how to advocate for themselves?
Yeah, I think initially when I started kind of talking about this, because I'll do workshops with educators, and I think it's through doing workshops with educators that I kind of pivoted, not away from, but including equally to, be wary of be aware of the treatment you deserve versus the treatment you might be receiving, and then, really think about if that's a space you want to stay in.
Mm-hmm.
But then also, and teachers should not be abusing you. Teachers should not be, I have a very strong belief that teachers should not be asking their students to recount any sort of trauma in class to perform. But also it's alongside saying that, understanding that a lot of teachers also went through that education. Mm-hmm. And so I want to provide empathy to teachers who are, giving that sort of education because it's what they got, but then exploring, was it healthy? Is this an opportunity for you to break, this cycle of an unhealthy practice that unfortunately affected you to different degrees of extremes based on teachers that I've had? Instead of being, well, because I went through this, you have to go through this too, or because this was the method, it's the method I want. I think it's hard to look back and say, wow, so much of my life was spent in this practice that wasn't safe for me and that really put a dent in my mental health. But being able to explore that instead of push that back is very necessary. Obviously, there are teachers who are wonderful in theater. But I do think that, a lot of it is, if you're not crying, you didn't do the work. If you're not invoking some horrifying memory to get through this scene in class, you're not doing it right. And that is absolutely untrue. So for students, that's not what should go into it. That is not the work you should have to put in emotionally. You have to be able to sustain performance. You have to be able to be trustworthy in terms of what you can bring every night. And if you're being asked to put yourself in that vulnerable position, it's not fair to you, and you're being put in a position to not be able to be necessarily a partner that's going to be able to create with a group if it every night depends on you invoking trauma in an unhealthy way to get through a performance. But including teachers in that discussion and saying, like, I hear you, I hear why you think this is the right thing to do. Let's re-examine that.
Yeah, there's a very entrenched way of thinking, particularly on the acting side of things, where not saying that everyone who goes into theater has experienced trauma, like capital T trauma in their lives, but like we have all gone through things in our lives, and being asked to revisit those is not sustainable as the foundation for a practice, and especially one that is, at the most extreme of its existence, asking for you to do that 8 times a week reliably for a paycheck, because our art is also our job. And there are other ways. And I think that system's holding on real tight to this idea.
And I think that's why I'm like, it doesn't mean you're any, like, it means you're like you have much more longevity as an artist if you can do away with, or like we had talked about earlier, people, if there is value, if a teacher finds real value in exploring and methodologies that explore actors past. I don't think an actor's past at all affects how their performances like could come out. I think that you can, you don't need to pull from trauma. You're an actor, you can like learn how to act, that, but also like offer, if there is value in it, if it's a practice you want to get into, offer mental health services with equal importance. Work with the counselor at your school or your college, to be available, to have a session with the students after any sort of practice. And I think for me, it's even more like, oh, what trauma is going to get you to, yell, I burned dinner most effectively. But instead saying, if this scene work that we're doing and the content you're delivering does invoke some of these memories for you, or does put you back in a place of personal trauma or personal experience, how are you going to take care of yourself through that? How are you going to get out of that? How are you going to deal with that? So yeah, for me, it's more like the opposite of, if that happens, if you experience that, making sure that you're safe and okay and processing and have access to healthcare, especially as a student, is like paramount. It's so important. And I've had teachers who have taken extreme advantage of that and not offered that, and then disclosed to me really tragic outcomes that performers have had because of methodologies that this teacher found exciting, that created exciting, unpredictable performances, that caused actors immense harm. And that was something that was a price to pay as I was educated. I was told in high school to lose weight for a role. Because it was considered like a sexy character. And the weight I had, according to, for some reason, like, was not going to fit that mold. And I'm like, well, why was I told to lose weight and not that all sorts of bodies can be desirable? Why were we not dismantling that ideology? Why are we not celebrating, the body I had as a body that could be romantic and worthy of that track, and instead being like, well, you can only do that if you're going to lose weight? The damage that had on me was extreme, and that came, not just from theater, from all sorts of angles, in terms of how my body was treated and discussed by many people, by peers and adults. But I think that there's no circumstance that a teacher should tell a student to lose weight. And not only that, that there's no body type that should be excluded from a kind of role. We talk about that a lot from trans angles, like cast trans people in heroic and romantic roles. You don't even have to acknowledge, like, sometimes you are making that role trans. Sometimes it's just a trans person playing that role. Both are great. Okay, as long as the actor is comfortable and respected. But I think there's, for some reason in this business, I think a lot of what we say is true of a lot of businesses. I think a lot of businesses expect, this kind of like eat shit when you're young attitude. A lot of
Yes.
I think theater especially puts an emphasis on extra stuff, including body and weight, and certainly other performance industries do that as well, to different degrees of extreme, some more extreme than theater.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that I understand if that's what you were taught, that's what you're going to perpetuate, but stop and examine why you're talking about an artist's body in reference to the kind of roles they can play and the kind of likability they can access. It's very disturbing.
It is. It really is. Especially like it's disturbing blanketly, but especially when we're talking about educationally. Like, as someone who has taught a lot of young people over the years, that is a conversation that I've heard over and over and over in casting rooms, and sometimes even just in class spaces. And it's gross every time. Like, that is not something we should be telling people. And I understand why it's there. It's part of our larger society. Like, this is not a problem that theater created, but it is taking a lot of the problems that already exist around us and just saying, hey, we're going to do all these at once. Good luck and stick to the system. But we can do better. We have to do better.
And it unfortunately takes looking back and going, for educators, for professionals who've been in the industry a long time, going, yeah, unfortunately, this was handled in this way while I was working in this space or while I was being educated in this space. And that is what I absorbed. And that's what I thought was true. But it doesn't, that's why I said that's showbiz. It doesn't have to be the way that it works. And it's so much healthier. And my favorite example of, trauma-based performance discussion is the Joker, the movie Joker versus this Billy on the Street sketch with Julianne Moore, which was, Joker. We hear about all the different people playing the Joker throughout history, about all of the, work they do to disappear into the character and traumatize their like castmates and stuff like that. And that's, edgy and exciting versus this Billy on this edgy and exciting versus this Billy on the Street sketch where he takes Julianne Moore around, or Billy Eichner takes Julianne Moore around as like a person in Times Square that you can give $1 to. And if you give $1 to her, she'll deliver a monologue from one of her movies from a note card. And it's a comedy sketch, but the monologues are from some of her heavier films. And they'll give her $1 as this joke, and she'll deliver a monologue and snap into it in this beautiful place, emotional place. She can get there, she can access it, she can do a really stunning Oscar-worthy performance, and then snap right back out of it and be in that sketch and be in that comedy moment and be back to herself. And I'm like, that is so healthy. No one got traumatized. She has proved that she understands the job of acting, the craft of acting, and not interweaving it with who she is and not, distressing other people. I am not trying to talk shit about actors who do that. I am just expressing, certainly to educators, that you can do it, that you can snap in and out of it with the right tools. Yep. And that is, I think, the healthiest way to do it, and should absolutely be the goal. And yeah, personal trauma should not come into the sphere. The Billy on the Street, Julianne Moore sketch really did a lot for me in terms of resources for educators.
Hey, it's a great sketch. If you have not seen that video, friends, definitely go watch it. It is worth it. It's also just a delightful sketch. It's great. It's very good. Also, Billy on the Street, good stuff. Well, first and foremost, our jobs as actors are not to re-traumatize ourselves. So, like, let's just throw that out there. Blanketly speaking, that is not a part of our job. So, taking care of your trauma personally, yeah, I will always say, do the work you need to do that fits best for you as an individual. But what you just said, it's not to bring trauma into the space. That's not our job. That's not anywhere in the description. Our job is to take stories and tell them.
Yes.
And tell them as authentically as we are able to. And that's it.
And I think calling it like a work hazard that so much emotionality a real life emotion can get into that is maybe extreme, because I think when we want to be artists, when we pursue that, we are acknowledging that we're going to step into spaces, it's unavoidable to be affected, I think, in many ways by the work that you're doing. Like I said,
Sure.
it should work the other way, where you prepare yourself to take care of it rather than expect it to be part of the job.
Yes.
But like, when I was writing a musical about a young person who was thinking about taking their life, and my understanding was I should be deep in it. I should understand that. I should be I should take that on emotionally to be able to tell that story. And the reality was, no, I should not have taken on emotionally. I should not have thought that I should take on emotionally what that person was going through. And thankfully I did realize it was affecting my day to day, and I was letting it kind of creep into everything that I was doing. And I got therapy. I went to therapy. And ultimately, I was writing that story to express, I was using it as, oh, well, it's theater, and oh, I'm allowed to feel this way in theater. But really, I had some stuff I needed to work through. That was an instance of, navigating, am I telling this story because it's a story? Am I telling this story because of something I need to express within myself?
Yeah.
And asking myself that question and exploring that question. And ultimately, yeah, like I was using that piece to work through stuff that I needed to work through in my own life that actually theater was not helpful to work through it with. And then I got some help, and then ultimately I realized that I had some of those feelings because I needed to transition, and it did not have anything to do with that show. But then I was able to return to that show, having dealt with the stuff I went through, and look at it through a much healthier lens, not getting into that mindset, and be able to see a path for finishing it, not relating as closely as I thought I had to that character. And that's why I look at longevity, as being like, I was not able to work on it when I thought I was doing everything as gritty as I needed to be involved in it. And we hear that a lot about medication, and that's a complicated topic, and I'm not going to speak on how everyone needs to handle that. But for me, I had this, I can't take medication, it will affect my art. When in reality, for me, for the person that I am individually, medication has helped me to have space in my brain to do the art. When I'm not on it, I'm not able to create. It's not more authentic. It's not edgier. It's not any less, my storytelling is not any less exciting or valid when I'm taking care of myself. And I'm very, I'm not shocked that that's the expectation, that if you don't take care of yourself, your art will be more valuable. It's totally the opposite.
We have taken this idea of the tortured artist, this idea of you have to be in the depths of the most awful human experiences in order to create art. We have not only placed it on a pedestal, we've put it as like the pinnacle of what art should be and how creation should work. And I think very slowly this conversation has been coming about of that's so not true. I very much appreciate Hannah Gadsby's Nanette for calling that out so blatantly, in a wonderful way. If you have not seen Nanette, go watch Nanette. It is wonderful. It is a brilliant piece, and we need to be talking about this more. Just generally speaking, because we still see people. I mean, just talking about Broadway for a second, I listen to a lot of people who are currently doing work in the Broadway sphere talking about how exhausted they are and how not sustainable the model is, just on a personal, individual level. And take trauma out of the situation for a second, and just the kind of exhaustion that comes from doing the work of putting on a person, a character, and putting on a story. All stories are emotional. That is hard work. That is a heavy lift. And how tough it is to take care of yourself in those spheres. And why are we not discussing this more and making adjustments to make this more viable?
I hate this phrase, but I also love this. I hate and love this phrase equally. And I feel like if you are only watering the garden of your career, your own garden will die. You have to water your own, and then if your garden dies, you can't water the garden of your career. You've lost access to that. You have to water the garden of your life, of your friendships, of your health, of your relationships, of the space outside of your career, the space outside of your education. And you have to create that life for yourself. And then I think the more and more that garden blossoms, the more and more you can water the other garden. But yeah, I feel very strongly about celebrating life outside of the industry. And I didn't do that a lot in my 20s, and I'm very regretful of pounding the pavement as hard as I did. I mean, I'm not, because I'm okay with where I am and I've learned a lot, but I did everything I thought I had to do, and it was often very lonely, and it was often very entrenched in a trauma-based mindset. It was often very hateful of my body. And, I'm out of that era of my life. I think substantially a lot of the aftershocks still exist within me, and I continue to work through them, but I don't think I gained anything from how much I put in my career. And I think I know people can look at it to different degrees and say, well, you got this, and this, and this, and isn't it wonderful? And I'm not taking those things for granted, but it's the grass is always greener. Like I have friends who have these incredible, thriving personal lives, and I'm like, I wish I had thought to prioritize that for me. I wish I'd prioritized myself and my social life, and it would have been at the expense of my career. And like I said, I kind of know, I learned what I learned and I did what I did, but I think looking at someone's accomplishments and the cast albums they had or the shows they had is not an indication of what it means to be successful, or what it means to be happy, or what it means to be fulfilled.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. All of that. And I think that the pandemic really brought a lot of this conversation to light in a big way. And to get on a personal soapbox for a moment, I just fully believe it does not have to be one or the other, and there are better ways to do this, which is why I do what I do and create what I create, and have this community beginning that is basically like you have to be able to acknowledge the struggle and the good, and also do your work and live your life and feel supported and be balanced. And like, yes, that's a lot of facets, but it's doable. This is not something that has to be one thing or the other thing, as was drilled into us.
Yeah.
Right. These concepts of, well, if you don't have this level of success by the time you are at this age, you're never going to make it in this town.
And that was my view. Like, I graduated college at 20. I was working. I was like, I have to do everything now. I have to do everything young. I have to do everything fast. That was not true. It was not accurate. It did not set me up for any sort of better experience. And when the pandemic happened, and that thing that was always what I could distract myself with went away, I had to focus on myself. And that was very, very scary. It continues to be scary, but I realized how kind of devastatingly far behind I was in that, and how inaccessible taking care of me felt, and how having no career goal made me feel like I had no purpose, and I had no, when that was not true. And that's still something that I very much am working on, because I've moved out of New York. I'm not in that space right now. And there's a lot of wonderful theater outside New York. The theater I'm doing right now is outside New York. I'm very happy with those spaces. But we're talking about the microcosm of Broadway as the pinnacle of success, and trying to crack into that, and trying to be part of that, and getting close and making that the entire journey of my life. The halting stop on that was things I've never had before. If that's not there, how are you going to take care of yourself? What do you want health-wise? What do you want personally? What do you want safety-wise? What do you want friendship-wise? I'm going like, I've never asked myself those questions. And that is such, it's not even a massive part of life. It's like the core of what life is, to ask those questions and pursue those things. It's not, can I get this article on playbill.com. All due respect to playbill.com. I hope they also know there that getting an article on playbill.com is not the pinnacle of life and success. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, being a human and living life, that's the thing. That's why we're here, right? This is the whole point. And then, oh, please, you want to jump in? Go ahead.
No. I agree with you. I was agreeing, and I was thinking, I know that there are people who can look at this and say, well, he is I've had a lot of privilege and a lot of ways to get into the spaces that I've been into. And my family supports, emotionally. And in the moments where it was between, do I leave New York because I can't pay rent? Help me in that way. And I have to acknowledge that. And I have to acknowledge that for people who are like, well, of course you can say that because you hit these certain checkpoints in your career. But I do feel very genuinely that it is worth saying that I'm grateful for the spaces I was in. I was privileged and lucky in so many ways, but I have to acknowledge the toll that it had on me, and the grass is always greener effect. And I hope that it helps people not only keep wanting to be in theater. It's not the takeaway at all, but also understand that when you get what you thought you wanted, it doesn't often, I think more often than not, it doesn't feel like that. There's
Right.
a different, a toll when you get that show. It's not that, oh, I got the show. It's that now everyone's talking about, well, if the reviews aren't XYZ, then, we failed. Or, not that that's verbatim a conversation I've had, but there's always another checkpoint. There's always another thing that just makes it impossible to keep up at every stage. So acknowledging the privilege and the luck and the experience that I've had, and pairing that with, I do just so genuinely believe that I can't only say there's value in other things but it's just so important. It's so important to know.
Yeah. I mean, watching over the past more than a decade of being here in New York, I am still in New York, the number of my friends, even before the pandemic, and then to a greater extent during the pandemic, who left the business. And it's not because they weren't talented or they didn't have what it takes, or it's none of that. It's they made choices to put themselves first as people, and decided that with what that looks like for them and what our industry looks like and how it's built, these things didn't match.
Yeah.
And I'm glad those people had those realizations. I am. But I think I'm sadder that those two things could not have created something that they were interested in at the time, of being themselves, being able to take care of themselves, lived a life that was healthy and balanced in all the ways they wanted it to be, and do the art in the industry they loved. But there has to be a way.
That should be the goal. And it's not to say, oh, well, F Broadway or XYZ.
No, of course not.
It's to say that the ideal is that we can have all of these things. We can do that hard work that artists and creatives have to do to put those shows up is elevated by putting your health and safety, if not higher, because it's, that's people are going to fight that, but like on the same level of importance. That is important, that we shouldn't be working ourselves to the bone, that the show sometimes can't go on, which we've all learned. And it just sometimes can't. And I'm sorry that you can't see the show that night, but it was at the expense of at least one person's health and safety. So it's worth it. It's always worth it. The show needs a moment, and that's okay. It's a show. It's an entertainment situation. It's a storytelling moment of bonding and communication and community. And if people are not safe in doing that, then it's not serving the purpose that it exists to serve.
That right there. Yeah, that's the epitome of everything we've been talking about, is that we are here to connect and be humans in a space together. And if we are not allowed to be humans going into that space, how could we possibly make that experience happen? And
theater is about, in many ways, many things, but a lot of it is about communicating empathy and empathizing with people with experiences and stories outside of your own. And sometimes you have that experience sitting in a show and being challenged to relate to people and experiences and identities you never thought you would relate to, and that's how you receive that, and sometimes it's a little bit of a different experience of having to empathize with a cast that cannot perform that night, and you don't get to see that show. And that exercise in empathy is not by consuming the art, it's by grappling with your disappointment in a situation so that the health and safety of others is prioritized.
And we should be steering that conversation in that direction too, because I mean, how many times during the pandemic I say that like it's over, COVID's still around, people. How many times though did we see these articles lifting up these people who the swing went on, who never learned that role to begin with and learned it in 2 hours so the show could happen? It's like, that's cool. I'm glad that that experience happened. I hope it happened in a very healthy way for everybody involved. But why did we not also celebrate this show took a moment because it was important for everybody involved, audience included.
Yeah. And I do want to also acknowledge that I think it's a different conversation, especially right now, that like we're talking about, you know, the ebb and flow of shows in terms of mental health and in terms of like accessibility in that way, but also like there's a totally different conversation about the stories that are not allowed to be told and the artists that are not allowed to, you know, be on stage and be in performance in extreme ways because of accessibility issues. Not even issues is a light word for that, like major accessibility problem like in theater, that it is not an industry that's conducive to a lot of people to even be able to tell the story. Sure, and that when you keep the expectations of this like high stress, high physical, sacrifice your health, you know, it's hard for people who have the capacity to perform that way. And it's completely it's impossible in many ways for people who don't have the capacity, but equally whose stories we need to hear. And so when we uphold that model of, you know, pound the pavement 100%, you know, it's exclusionary fundamentally of people who, you know, who don't have the option to do that, who cannot follow that model. We don't get to hear their stories. And how awful is that? And if we just shifted the expectations in the model, we'd have access to infinitely more stories, infinitely more artists' work, with just a hair more understanding of what theater could be instead of what theater has always been.
Yeah. Yes. And we need those stories. We need to hear more, so much more.
But it's so scary to be challenged.
It is.
So many people.
It is.
You know, it's something that a lot of people want to go to art to enjoy the show, and art has such power in absorbing another person's experience. Yeah. And connecting to another person's experience, and it's not always super fun. Like. True. And
that's true. That's a very good point. And it also speaks to some of the stuff that we were talking about earlier with the way things have quote unquote always been done, and that show business kid, those sorts of models that still exist educationally and professionally, and taking the moment to examine those things. It's not a comfortable experience. I think that is worth putting out there to the world. It's like, you do have to make a decision, to make a choice that's harder in order to do that. But I would hope that for the sake of yourself and for the sake of not doing harm to others, that is a conversation you'd like to have with yourself.
Yeah. And when we explore things like you know, like these common phrases of theater work are so damaging, like when you look at all deeper, like when we explore, you know, you'll never work in this town again. You know, I think the typical angle of that, certainly for me, I'm sure for others, not for everyone, but I'm sure for others, is, you know, the reaction to that is, well, I shouldn't ever say anything when I'm in an uncomfortable position. I have to play this game as it exists. And that is the reaction. Whereas the reaction should be, people should not wield the power to shut an artist down if they say something or behave in a way that that individual person with power does not like.
Yes.
So you'll never work in this town again is a reflection of the person who said that.
Right.
And not, you know, and we're talking about that in the spaces of actor vulnerability and actor safety being challenged, and not, you know, people who are unsafe to work with not working in this town again.
Yes.
You know, that's a different conversation, but it is often used as a power play against people who are just trying to seek better conditions.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we've seen this happen time and time again, I think over the past year and a half, as people have begun to speak up a bit more about their experiences, having some of the blowback be in that realm of, well, then get out sort of a feeling. But I continue to have hope that these conversations develop in a better way, in a more positive way, in a more productive way. and that we begin to figure out other ways to do things that live outside of the system as currently is.
Yeah. And I think that there's a generation of people now coming into theater who already know all these things, who already have all these ideologies. And, but I do still think that Broadway in educational circles, probably even for some of these younger people, exists as the top of the pyramid in a way that it is just one facet. And I think that it's so hard, and I don't have answers for when you are training in this business. And there's that realization that it's not going to change as fast as you want it, or that an empowering speech does not change the way it works. And, no one's going to be able to champion it into being a healthier business at this moment right now. And then moving forward, how do I deal with that? Because I want to be in theater. I want my career to be theater. I want to be working in this space. There's so many incredible people. So many of them have power. There's so many wonderful people in the business. So many wonderful people. But, the systems are not set up to be financially sustaining. And, as you're balancing out, how can I live this dream of being in theater, but also stay healthy? I like I said, I think that it's this complicated balance of opening the door to the idea that occasionally not pursuing theater and occasionally, putting that aside, certainly having another job. I don't know any theater artists, certainly anyone who's not who doesn't have another job. Like, everyone has another job. Like, you cannot afford. My show was off Broadway. That was maybe going to pay for expenses in New York for 2.5 months. Like, maybe. Like that's fine. That is not a sign of failure. Everyone has one. But also being like, if I step away from theater, it's not a failure. It doesn't need to be done with theater. If I'm taking some time to assess what success looks like versus what I thought it looks like versus fulfillment, what I thought, like, navigating all of that doesn't mean that you're stepping away from the business, or it doesn't mean that you're like giving up on your dreams. It's just figuring out that success in theater and fulfillment and storytelling and creative collaboration can look like many, many, many different things.
Yes.
And it's not Broadway in a lot of those cases, and that shouldn't be the expectation. That shouldn't be the educational expectation.
Yes.
I've had I look back at these experiences I've had in a room with friends in college, and that was just some of the most fun I had, and I want to go back to that. I know it's not financially sustainable. It's disappointing, but I'm assessing now, and I'm working through what I want out of my creative career and my storytelling. And it's, those moments were worth it to me to, put the other pieces together in my life to continue to try to pursue that feeling in as financially sustainable a way, without sacrificing my health and safety, without sacrificing my values, while still making sure that I am listening to people who, the industry has failed in much greater ways than myself, and making sure that I'm continuing to make sure that whenever I'm in a room, I'm going to advocate as much as I can for the changes in this industry, even when I know it's easier and safer for me to keep my mouth shut and do the work and do what I'm told at the expense of other people and people who are excluded from those spaces entirely.
Yep. Yeah. And I'll take a moment here to just pinpoint on something that you've mentioned several times now, which is financial viability or stability. Our entire industry is not financially viable. Top to bottom, plain and simple, Broadway's model really isn't sustainable financially, and we know that in our brains. And yet, we haven't quite figured out how to navigate this yet, but it is something that's true top down, which means that no matter where you are in terms of level of the work you're creating, you still need to figure that out for yourself. And I will always ask people to have that examination of themselves and their lives and see Because like whether you're doing an eight shows a week on Broadway, or whether you are doing a small reading of a new musical of something that like your friend wrote, it's the same thing. You still need the balance, no matter where you are and what you're doing. And I also want to throw out there, a student of mine said something that was interesting this last week or the week before, that was about the financial viability or lack thereof of the Broadway model, which was, they made the observation that before the pandemic, in the quote unquote resurgent golden age of Broadway, we had some shows out there that were doing some of the work that maybe the system doesn't ask it to do. But that since the reopening, we haven't quite had any of those shows because the focus has been on things that are money making, or at least have what they think is the best shot of money making. And it's shifted the artistic landscape even here.
I mean, and when we are seeing those shows get some faith, like Strange Loop, which won Best Musical, which is an extraordinary show and is,
And the Pulitzer.
less than a year. What I think that says is, why can't, obviously there's answers why, and I know there are people who are working on this, who are producers on Broadway, who are excited and energized and interested in dedicating themselves to changing this landscape. So they exist. But like, can Broadway be a place where it can financially sustain those ticket sales for Strange Loop and that like functionality, at a different degree than what it needed to stay on Broadway? Can we facilitate different, levels of sellability at this high of a level of knowing a show exists, like PR? Like, can that exist? Can we give that coverage and that PR and that celebration to shows that are going to sell at a different rate than Wicked and Lion King?
Yeah.
Like, can we figure that model out?
Yeah.
I pose that question. I know it's complicated. I know people are like, no, and I know why. And I'm like, okay, like, I don't know why. But I'm just saying that out loud.
Yeah, I mean, someone pointed this out to me a few years ago, which I don't know why my brain never thought about it this way. But we, here in New York, we talk about Broadway, we talk about off-Broadway, we talk about off-Broadway, and those are very distinctly different things, almost like they exist on 3 different Manhattans. Whereas West End theater, it's not like you're confined to these blocks in these theater venues. It's if it's there and it's in London and it's up and it's running, it is West End theater. And like, we don't do that, but we could so easily.
I would be thrilled for that.
Wouldn't that be wonderful, where we don't like striate it and try to squeeze everything into this square hole?
Yeah, because things can get the coverage and the care that Broadway shows get while not having that budget or that need to sell that many tickets. Like why can't we just like turn the spotlight on some of those shows? Because what happens with those shows is, sometimes that does happen, but then those shows go to Broadway. Well, do they have to? That's been dangerous for a lot of shows when they get that success off Broadway and then move to Broadway and then don't have that same sellability on that scale. Like, can we celebrate shows at that level? Can not being on Broadway be a reason to celebrate a show and pump up a show and let it succeed? Yeah, I mean, I guess we see that with like Sleep No More and stuff like that. So it's very possible to do that with Sleep No More, again, a massive show, very large budget. But it is possible. But I think
there's a question I ask of my students when they're talking to me, like my writing students, when they talk to me about their shows, which is, I always ask them, where do you want this show to go? Like, what is in your mind the top tier of landing point for the work you want your show to do? And so often the answers I get from people is like, actually, I think I want this to live as like an educational tour, or I want it to have a short off-Broadway run so we can get that album made, and then just like it's licensing and getting the album out there. It's like, great. These are other ways to do this. They're viable. And then it, like, I think about, so I've been on TikTok over the past, like, I don't know, 10 months. It's an interesting world out there. It's delightful. But one of the people I follow, he is, oh, what's his handle? Your Musical Dealer, I think is what it is. And he talks about all these shows, and he finds them through their albums, and some of them have never had any sort of quote unquote big production. But it's like, there are ways to get the stuff out there.
And I hope that I sound antiquated in my like being like, I was educated that Broadway was the tippy top, and regardless of that, whether or not like that is the financial sustainability. So, you know, when you're looking at that, that's still unavoidable. But yeah, I hope that people, and I got there eventually. Like the first 2 shows I did, I was like, better get these to Broadway, or like, oh, Broadway or bust. But then I started writing concert musicals. I started writing shows I could put up easily, low budget, that, you know, the money could go into paying people and not the set, like stuff like that. And the Carrie 2, which is entirely a staged reading as it is as a show. And so that became more, I was like, oh yeah, I just want to be telling stories. I just want to be out there with my friends doing this work and getting as far as we can to reach people because we like what we're saying. But I think TikTok has definitely changed the game on that. The thing for me that I struggle with TikTok is that as a writer who's not a performer, it's not a medium that I enjoy creating for, but it is such a pipeline now because I think a lot of writers have to perform their own work and have to have that ability to present it in a way. And it's just not, I tried that and I pushed myself into that and ended up writing a play about how catastrophic that was for me. Well, that is not what that play is going to seem like it was. It was very influenced by it. It's a very horror piece. And so that's, you know, it spoke to, well, this new medium arose and I can't meet this expectation in terms of performance, so I'm a failure, blah, blah, blah. And then being like, no, it's fine. It's just not the medium for you. I do long form storytelling. I don't have a ring light. I don't have, you know, I don't have that capability to do the film. And I think it's incredible when people can, and those skills are so valuable. And it's something that I put some energy into and went, well, I can put a lot more energy into this, and I don't like presenting this way.
Right. Yeah.
Or I can just go back to the work that I do and, you know, not be jealous of people who are succeeding in that way. Like sometimes, you know, my inclination is to be, with full honesty, but being like, we're all creating in different ways. And I just wish there was more of a pipeline for artists who are not able to perform and produce their own work.
Sure. Yeah.
In that landscape.
Mm-hmm.
But I celebrate a lot of what it's doing. And I think it has made some musical theater stuff, you know, very exciting and accessible. And the accessibility of it is really, really great.
Yeah.
I think theater, you know, the video conversation is complicated, but
it is
being able to make these shows not so exclusive and available to people across the world and country is just of immense value.
Yeah.
And I wish that model existed for shows as they closed, you know, as, you know, if we to record a show when it closes and release it and give people, you know, you don't have to do it while it's running. But then
though I am of the camp that I think it actually sells more tickets when you release a pro show when it's running. But
yeah, it's, you know, it's complicated. It requires more money. It requires, you know, different stuff with Actors Equity. But yeah, how exciting to get the work to people. It's about getting the work to people. It's about reaching people with the stories. And I'm so sad. I think I'm so sad about the stories that I'm not able to see, and I have a lot of like privilege and access to things, and I still can't see so much. And a lot of that I think is work from artists who either the business is built to shut out for whatever accessibility reason, or artists who looked at that's showbiz kid, take what you get model and said, no, I'm not going to do that. And artists who walked away from that, I'm desperate to consume their work. I'm like desperate for the stories of people who chose to prioritize their health and mental health and personal lives and safety. Like I want that art so badly, but they didn't play the game. And we don't get that art because they put themselves first in that way. And it's not, you know, it's not the people who don't. It's not a reflection. I didn't, and tons of good work is coming from people who don't, you know, it's just also that experience of whose work are we missing out on because they did say, hey, I actually can't be in this business anymore. Yeah. In the way that it's set up to excuse abuse. And something that was very interesting, you know, there's a big conversation right now about, let's just keep it to, you know, when you're performing, do you give 100% or not? And what does that mean? And I'm in the camp of, you can't possibly give 100% to theater, nor should you, or can you. It's just not a thing that's possible. And someone had commented, and that it is the idea that it is just a job, that it is your job, it is a career, it is a job, in the way, that when you are in the game of life, you have your job card, you have your car, like it's the job card. That's what it is.
Yeah.
It's not your car, it's not your family, it's not your other cards you pull. But then someone commented that, that can sound reductive to people who have tried. And that's where, people are like, well, that's, I had that dream and I didn't get it. So it sounds reductive. It sounds like people are taking it for granted. To say it's just a job, it's not the be all end all. But I'm like, it's helpful. It's only helpful for those people too, to insinuate that, because if you make it the be all end all and someone's not getting to that level, or that's not going to be a part of their career, what help is it just to act like it's the pinnacle of everything?
Yeah.
It's only helpful to say, no, it is a version of theater. It is a type of contract you get. It's unfortunate that it's the most financially viable one, because it is very hard to access. It's very exclusive. Yes. And a lot of the pathways include abuse to various degrees.
Yeah.
But it is one version of a theatrical experience and job and career. And you can create that in so many other ways. And it doesn't help anyone to be like, oh, you know what, never mind. Yeah, that is going to hurt people who didn't get there. It is everything. Broadway, never mind. Broadway is everything. It's like,
yeah.
It's not true, and it's not healthy for anyone. It's not healthy for the people who are on Broadway. It's not healthy for the people for whom that's not going to be a part of their career.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
The person who I said that to did agree with and respond, in the delightful response of discourse to that. So it was not, a fight or anything. It was just pointing out another side to it and why people might react painfully to discussing Broadway in that way. And in breaking down, and taking away the dream aspect of it and exploring it as a career that has issues. And, it was more about that and having that discourse than fighting about it. So I appreciated that.
And I always appreciate when discourse is good like that. Yeah, good's such a reductive word, my apologies, but is done in that healthy way.
Good discourse on Twitter. It's rare.
It is. It's asking a lot of a platform that's built to do the opposite, but that's for another day.
Oh, people finding one tweet and deciding they know your entire life story and character. Okay, buddy, sure, that's who I am. Okay.
Well, so my apologies for this very loud fire truck.
Oh, I can't hear anything. Your Zoom is doing a really good job of your mic, being at you.
Nailing it. Shall we do some ender questions for today?
I would love that.
So I'm curious, because you do a lot of writing in various forms. What's your favorite non-writing activity?
See, this was so hard for me until the pandemic, because I was like, if it's not of value, if it's not of career success, it's not something that is important for my life. And if I can't make money out of it, if I can't make success out of it, why would I even do it? I really I like seeing movies right now. I'm doing a lot of that for myself, which is still within the scope of my career. I really like, this all sounds like, I take very long walks. I will go on 2-hour walks. I live by the lake. I stayed in Chicago, honestly, largely because I like the city. I like the space. I like the rent, but I love living by the lake. And there's, this pathway on Lake Shore that goes all the way down the city, down, from one of the top north neighborhoods all the way down. And I live by that now, and I can just walk that and put on some music. And I'm right now, I'm not even listening to music as much. I'm just like absorbing the world, because usually I'd be like, oh, I'm going to put on, a playlist I made based on this character or this story, and I'm going to devise the story while I walk, and that will make this walk valuable, and that will give me purpose during this walk. And I'm like, no, don't look at the birds, like look at the lake, look at the water, look at the people. And that is just new for me, but I really love that. Like, I have playlists now that are just for me and are not for characters and stories, because I am not unfortunately, I work in something that I love, and it's so hard to keep loving it. I love music. I love I need it. I need it so much. It's a huge part of my coping mechanisms, and I want it to stay, I want it to stay in a world where I can listen to it and not feel stressed out. And I'm starting to be able to do that. But also I'm very good at Beat Saber. I am shockingly good at Beat Saber. So I've been really disappearing into that. I really lose myself. I just beat Sandstorm on Expert, which is a really big accomplishment for me.
I don't know anything about it, but I applaud you.
Congratulations to me for beating Sandstorm on Expert. Yeah.
The walk. Yeah, there's nothing like a good walk. I know a lot of people have recently taken to making fun of the phrase touch grass, but I it's important.
You love a touch grass moment.
Go to nature. We love her.
There's a little nature walk like by my house. It's still a very like city-based area. I live in a city. The nature walks are right there. It's so funny that they're like, this is the nature walk. And it's like this tiny square of trees and like this little like bird sanctuary. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is glorious. It's like the size of a warehouse.
In cities, we will take what we can get. Honestly, and run with it.
I can't. I don't know how to drive anymore. I can't drive to anywhere more woodlandy. I get what I get.
Oh, I hear that. I feel very lucky to live in such an accessible city where I can get to nature if I need to. Not that I do enough. I don't, but I could. Okay, so. Is there a story that you know you really want to tell that you have not been able to yet, or haven't even started tackling yet?
So many. I've done a lot of stories I care deeply about. Some of them are hopefully in pipeline. Some of them are in pipelines, and then that falls through, and then I get set. But I think for this, the thing that jumps to mind for this is something that I've been told kind of to back burner, and I'm like, oh, that's such a bummer because I do. And I wrote an outline for like a really basic outline. I'm trying to figure out if there's a world for it. It's very much like Home Alone. It's about and it would either be like a film or like maybe a 6-episode like Christmas miniseries about some siblings who take their young trans sibling who's not able to be out at her grandparents where they go for Christmas. They steal the car and go to New York and have their own Christmas where she's able to be out, and they all have something that they want to express about themselves that they're unable to, and kind of these young people who step away from this more antiquated ideology and just kind of have a good time. But my team encourages trans stories. It's more me who's like, I would put my heart into this and into this story of this 10-year-old trans girl and celebrating a trans child. And do I want to begin that journey of putting my heart into this, knowing that right now it's going to be very hard for production companies to take a risk on the story of a trans child because of the very incorrect lies that are being spread about the community and the words that could be thrown at those companies for supporting trans children. Right. So I hope that I can find that future for this piece because I love writing a Christmas movie. And I would really love to do this. And I liked my outline a lot and I really believed in it. So we'll see. We'll see if I can get my Home Alone trans film. But
pardon me. My fingers are crossed for that because that sounds amazing and I want that.
We'll see. I have a meeting next week where I'm going to try to, but I wrote a Christmas movie that was, oh, this is complicated. If people stayed this long, it's fine. Where it's very much about, it's small, it's nuanced. It's about a cis straight woman who does not like Christmas. And she lives next to this trans guy. Her neighbor is a trans man who is unable to decorate his apartment because he just got top surgery, and she helps him decorate his apartment, and he loves Christmas and he loves the spirit of it, and she's very hateful of it. And it turns out that her hatred of it has a lot to do with how her family treated her gay brother who has passed away, and her association of Christmas and some of the religiousness of that family with really negative things. But his love of Christmas and his love of that spirituality, even being trans and being disconnected from his family, and how they kind of come together to create their own kind of spiritual landscape. And what I maybe should have realized was we're at a place where I think in film, especially, we're watching people who are considered very, conventionally attractive, often like we're watching white cis gay people get more success if and still struggle in film, following models that are tracking models that we're very familiar with that explore similar themes and so writing a film that is meant to kind of comment on that when we're still not even able to have the representation where we're just existing within it.
Yeah.
Like exploring how queerness is portrayed in Christmas movies. I'm not sure we're there yet because we don't have enough queer Christmas movies to even like just enjoy, to just have the Christmas romance. And I see it from both ends. I think both should be able to exist. I would love to have this film that is candid about the queer experience, but I also understand that sometimes you just want the gay version of it. And there's a lot of really exciting and queer and diverse Christmas movies that stream. So a lot was not the right word, but there are some.
There are some that exist, yes.
The streaming world is kinder to the community and to diversity.
Absolutely.
Kinder is still maybe not the word, but we'll see. I mean, I get it. I'm not going to sit here and be like, it's not enough that the stories we are seeing are still in very conventional and very acceptable forms, because it's good to have them, because we don't have those.
Right.
We don't have, Love, Simon was monumental, and that was the story of two very hot people falling in love. The audiences were very, I think, comfortable watching that. Not even I think it got protested still, and it was it's that's a whole other complicated conversation.
Yes, it is.
We want to support queer art in forms where queer people are just having the time of their life,
and
the genre, and chopping the tree down while their hot neighbor brings them a mug of cocoa. And we want queer art that deconstructs queerness in spaces where it has not been accepted and is not welcome. All of the multitudes that we can contain. And I'm celebrating the artists who are doing those things, and the producers who are funding those things, and the creatives who are believing those things. 3 cheers for them. They exist. They're out there.
And cheers for you for these stories that you are writing, and I'm sure we'll continue to write. And we need them and we want them. And, I will continue to hope for the best for you and your projects here.
Thank you.
Thank you for spending time today doing this conversation. This is wonderful. You're wonderful. I love everything that you do.
And one time, one time I did a 3-hour podcast on only Carrie the musical.
Really?
So we're coming in really under time for.
Wow. My God, I'll have to have you back then. Let's chat more.
So I can go 3 hours on Carrie. I think we even had to cut ourselves off. I love Carrie. That's Carrie and Mamma Mia. Here we go again.
This is a conversation for another day. Absolutely. We will be back. We will be back with this convo. I can promise you. Where should the people find you, Preston, if they do not already follow you, which is a travesty if they don't?
Oh, they are welcome to find me anywhere on @Preston Max Allen. That's my Instagram, it's my Twitter, my website that has a lot of my videos. It's PrestonMaxAllen.com. And yeah, I'm there chilling out, often talking about this stuff, talking about theater, candidly and honestly, and absorbing people who are doing the same.
Yes. Absolutely. I will have all those in the description below for the people. You will be able to just click through, and please do follow Preston. I mean, it is a joy to follow Preston. Also, if you really like hero content, if you haven't had enough hero today.
She's sleeping now.
Oh, what an angel. There's plenty of hero also on Preston's social media. So,
and also I do recommend, if you are willing to Google anything, the press release, the Broadway World press release for the concert I produced with a wonderful team called A Place for Us, celebrating trans non-binary artists in musical theater. If you look at all those names of all those artists and those writers, it's an incredible group of people to be aware of. And those people have other lists of incredible people to be aware of. So very much, I would say, if you are so inclined, Google that, find those folks, and follow them as well.
I will find that link and I will put it in the description as well. Absolutely. I am always happy to help get more names of people out in the world who everyone should know. So thank you for mentioning that. And my goodness, the extent of your artistry, your brain, your knowledge, but also your heart is something that I really celebrate. And I'm just so happy that anyone who did not know you, who's listening to this, got the opportunity to meet you at least a little bit. So thank you once again for being here.
Thank you for creating this space to feel like I can talk in such a friendly and candid way. I think artists like you and cats like Hero are the reason that I am still functioning.
Well, I am honored to be put on the same level as Hero, so thank you for that. So thank you all for being here with us today. Like, subscribe, do all the things, and we'll catch you next time in the next interview. All right, everyone. Bye. Thank you all for being here with me today, and I'll see you again soon. Cheers.